The day Karen Middleton marched across my property line with her clipboard and HOA badge, pointing at my beautiful restored cabin and screaming about illegal structures and property violations, I knew she had no idea who she was messing with. What she didn't know was that 15 years ago, I had built the very clubhouse she held her precious HOA meetings in, and I had receipts for everything. The look on her face when I walked into that emergency meeting with my blueprints, invoices, and a slideshow revealing the truth, well, that's a moment I'll never forget. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more epic Karen stories, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. My name is Dana Mitchell, and I've been a master carpenter for over 20 years. I learned the trade from my grandfather, who taught me that good craftsmanship isn't just about following plans. It's about understanding wood, respecting the materials, and building something that will last generations. When I moved to Willowbrook Estates 5 years ago, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for peace, a place where I could continue my work and maybe restore something beautiful in the process. The property I bought came with an old hunting cabin that had been abandoned for decades. The structure was solid, built in the 1940s by someone who understood quality construction, but years of neglect had taken their toll. The roof leaked, the windows were broken, and vegetation had started to reclaim the foundation. Most people would have torn it down, but I saw potential. I saw a project that would challenge my skills and create something truly special. I spent months carefully dismantling the damaged portions, cataloging every salvageable piece of wood, every original fixture that could be restored. The cabin had been built from old-growth timber, the kind you can't find anymore, with grain patterns that told stories of centuries of growth. I hand-selected reclaimed materials from other historic buildings, matching the era and style perfectly. Every joint was cut by hand, every piece fitted with the precision that comes from decades of experience. The restoration took 2 years of evenings and weekends. I rebuilt the foundation using traditional techniques, replaced the roof with cedar shakes that I split myself, and installed windows that I found at an architectural salvage yard. The interior featured exposed beams, a stone fireplace that I rebuilt stone by stone, and floors made from reclaimed heart pine that glowed like honey in the afternoon sun. It wasn't just a cabin anymore, it was a masterpiece of traditional craftsmanship. I used the space as both a workshop and a retreat. The large windows provided perfect natural light for detailed work, and the peaceful setting helped me focus on the intricate projects that made my reputation. Word spread about my skills, and I found myself with more work than I could handle. Custom furniture, historic restorations, architectural millwork for high-end homes. My waiting list stretched months ahead. The neighbors seemed to appreciate the transformation. Where once stood a rotting eyesore, now sat a beautiful example of traditional architecture that enhanced the entire neighborhood. I received compliments regularly, and several people asked if I'd consider similar projects for them. The cabin had become a focal point of pride, a reminder that careful restoration could bring new life to forgotten treasures. That's why Karen Middleton's arrival on that crisp October morning caught me completely off guard. I was outside, applying a fresh coat of linseed oil to the cedar siding, when I heard her voice cutting through the peaceful morning air like a circular saw-through oak. "Excuse me, excuse me." She was marching across my yard with the determined stride of someone who had appointed herself judge and jury of the neighborhood. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a navy blazer despite the casual nature of her mission. The HOA badge pinned to her lapel caught the morning sun, and she carried a clipboard like it was a weapon. I set down my brush and turned to face her, wiping my hands on a shop rag. "Good morning. Can I help you? I'm Karen Middleton, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." She announced this like it was supposed to impress me. "I'm here about that." She pointed at my cabin with her pen as if it were something offensive. "My cabin? What about it?" "It's an unapproved structure. According to HOA regulations, any building or addition must be submitted for architectural review before construction begins. You never filed the proper paperwork." I couldn't help but smile. "Karen, I hate to break it to you, but this cabin was built in 1947. It predates your HOA by about 50 years. Her face reddened. I don't care when it was originally built. You clearly made significant modifications without approval. The HOA has the right to review any changes to existing structures. The HOA has no jurisdiction over pre-existing structures, especially ones that predate the development. I kept my voice calm, though I could feel irritation building. I've done nothing but restore this cabin to its original condition. That's not what I see. She made a show of consulting her clipboard. I see new windows, new roofing, new siding. These constitute major modifications that require approval. You have 30 days to submit your plans for review or tear down the unauthorized improvements. The sheer audacity of her demand left me speechless for a moment. You want me to tear down my restoration work? I want you to follow the rules like everyone else. The HOA exists to maintain property values and neighborhood standards. Your little project here violates multiple architectural guidelines. Which guidelines specifically? She flipped through her papers with obvious frustration. The guidelines regarding structural modifications, roof materials, window placement, and general aesthetic compatibility with the neighborhood. Karen, this cabin was built with traditional methods and materials that are far superior to anything in this development. The craftsmanship exceeds any modern construction standard. That's irrelevant. What matters is HOA approval. You can't just do whatever you want because you think you know better than the Architectural Review Board. I felt my patience wearing thin. I've been a master carpenter for 20 years. I've restored historic buildings, built custom homes, and worked on projects that your Architectural Review Board couldn't even comprehend. This cabin is better built than half the houses in this neighborhood. Your credentials don't matter. What matters is following proper procedures. You have 30 days to comply, or will be forced to take legal action. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Dana? The emergency HOA meeting is scheduled for next Thursday at 7 p.m. in the Clubhouse. You might want to attend and explain yourself to the board. As she walked away, I stood there holding my brush, trying to process what had just happened. The clubhouse she had mentioned, the same building where she held her power trips and made her arbitrary decisions, had a history she clearly didn't know about. A history that was about to become very relevant. I spent the rest of the day researching HOA law and reviewing my files. The cabin definitely predated the HOA, and my restorations were well within my rights as a property owner. But Karen's threat of legal action concerned me. Even if I was in the right, fighting the HOA would be expensive and time-consuming. That evening, I called my lawyer, Tom Rodriguez, who had handled my property purchase and various business matters over the years. I explained the situation, and he immediately started laughing. Dina, you're worrying about nothing. Pre-existing structures are grandfathered in, and restoration work doesn't require HOA approval. This Karen woman is either ignorant of the law or hoping you don't know your bow rights. She seemed pretty confident about her position. They always do. Here's what you need to do. Document everything. Take photos of the cabin from every angle. Gather any receipts or records of your restoration work, and prepare a timeline showing the cabin's history. If she wants to play hardball, we'll show her exactly why she's wrong. I spent the next several days gathering documentation. I photographed every detail of the cabin, collected receipts for materials and tools, and created a comprehensive record of the restoration process. But as I went through my files, I came across something that made me smile. Something that would change the entire dynamic of my conflict with Karen Middleton. Buried in my project files was a folder labeled Willowbrook Estates Clubhouse, 2009. Inside were complete blueprints, material specifications, contractor invoices, and progress photos. 15 years ago, I had been the lead contractor for the construction of the HOA clubhouse. I had bid on the project, won the contract, and spent 6 months building the facility that Karen now used as her headquarters. I remembered the project well. The HOA had wanted something impressive but cost-effective, a building that would serve multiple functions while maintaining the aesthetic standards of the development. I had designed and built a structure that included meeting rooms, a kitchen, storage areas, and a large multipurpose space. The board had been thrilled with the results, and I had been proud of the work. but I also remembered some of the corners that had been cut. The board had insisted on certain cost-saving measures that I had documented carefully. They wanted cheaper materials in some areas, simplified construction methods, and reduced specifications for electrical and plumbing systems. I had advised against these changes, but they had insisted, and I had followed their instructions while carefully documenting every deviation from standard practice. Now, 15 years later, I suspected those cost-cutting measures were beginning to show. I made a mental note to inspect the clubhouse more carefully during the upcoming meeting. The days leading up to the HOA meeting passed quickly. I continued my research, gathering more documentation and preparing my response to Karen's demands. I also reached out to neighbors who had complimented my work on the cabin, asking if they would be willing to speak on my behalf. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People appreciated the restoration and saw it as an asset to the neighborhood. Thursday evening arrived with a cool breeze and clear skies. I loaded my truck with boxes of documentation, my laptop for the presentation I had prepared, and a portable projector I had borrowed from a friend. If Karen wanted a show, I was going to give her one she would never forget. The clubhouse looked exactly as I had built it. A modest but well-proportioned building with cedar siding, stone accents, and large windows that provided natural light during the day. As I walked toward the entrance, I noticed several issues that confirmed my suspicions about the cost-cutting measures. The gutters were pulling away from the fascia boards, several cedar shingles were cracked or missing, and the front steps showed signs of settling that suggested foundation problems. Inside, the main meeting room was filled with folding chairs arranged in neat rows facing a small stage. About 30 people had gathered, a mix of longtime residents and newer homeowners. Karen stood at the front of the room, consulting with 2 other board members and organizing her papers with the efficiency of someone who enjoyed being in charge. She looked up as I entered, and her expression immediately soured. "Dana, I'm glad you decided to attend. I hope you're prepared to explain your situation to the board." "I'm prepared for several things, Karen. This should be interesting." I found a seat near the back of the room and began setting up my equipment. Several neighbors nodded or waved, and I could see curious glances at the boxes of documentation I had brought. The atmosphere felt tense, like everyone was expecting a confrontation. At exactly 7 o'clock, Karen called the meeting to order. She went through the usual preliminaries, reading minutes from the previous meeting and discussing routine business. But I could see her eagerness to get to the main event, the public shaming of the homeowner who had dared to challenge HOA authority. "Now we come to new business," she announced, her voice taking on a more formal tone. "We have a violation issue that requires board action. Dana Mitchell has constructed an unapproved structure on her property in clear violation of our architectural guidelines, despite being notified of the minor violation. She has refused to seek proper approval or remove the unauthorized improvements." She gestured toward me with obvious displeasure. "Dana, would you like to explain your actions to the board?" I stood up slowly, gathering my laptop and the first box of documentation. "Actually, Karen, I'd like to give a presentation. I think everyone here will find it educational." "A presentation isn't necessary. We just need you to acknowledge the violation and commit to compliance." "I think it's very necessary." I walked to the front of the room and began setting up my projector. "In fact, I think this presentation will resolve several issues that have been bothering me." Karen looked uncertain for the first time since I had met her. "Dana, this is irregular. We have procedures for addressing violations, and I have procedures for addressing false accusations." I connected my laptop to the projector and turned to face the room. "My name is Dana Mitchell, and I've been a master carpenter for over 20 years. I specialize in historic restoration and custom construction. 5 years ago, I bought a property in this neighborhood specifically because it included a historic cabin that I wanted to restore. The first slide of my presentation appeared on the wall behind me, showing the cabin as it had looked when I purchased the property. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as people saw the dramatic difference between the original condition and the beautiful structure they knew today. This cabin was built in 1947 by a craftsman who understood quality construction. It predates this HOA by over 50 years. which means it's grandfathered under both local zoning laws and HOA regulations. Any improvements I've made are legally considered restoration work, not new construction." End quote. I clicked to the next slide, showing the cabin's current condition. Every modification I've made has been designed to restore the cabin to its original appearance while upgrading the structural integrity and safety systems. I've used period-appropriate materials and traditional construction methods throughout the process. Karen interrupted, her voice sharp with frustration. "That's all very interesting, but the fact remains that you didn't seek HOA approval for major modifications. The board has the right to review any changes to existing structures." "Actually, Karen, the board has no such right regarding pre-existing structures. But since you've raised the issue of my qualifications and the quality of my work, I'd like to share something with everyone here." I clicked to the next slide, which showed the title page of my original proposal for the Clubhouse project. Willowbrook Estates Clubhouse, Construction Proposal, Dana Mitchell, General Contractor, March SCM. 2009. The room fell silent. Karen's face went pale as she realized what she was looking at. 15 years ago, I was the lead contractor for the construction of this clubhouse. I designed the building, managed the construction, and personally oversaw every aspect of the project. The structure we're sitting in right now was built by the same hands that restored my cabin. I clicked through slides showing the original blueprints, construction progress photos, and final completion documentation. The board at that time was very pleased with my work. They praised the quality of construction and the attention to detail. They said it was exactly what they had envisioned for the community. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the room as people connected the dots. Several longtime residents nodded, remembering the construction process and the positive response it had received. "But I also want to share something else with you," I continued, my voice taking on a more serious tone. "During the construction of this clubhouse, the board insisted on certain cost-saving measures that I advised against. They wanted cheaper materials in some areas, simplified construction methods, and reduced specifications for critical systems." I clicked to a slide showing my original specifications alongside the board-approved modifications. I documented every change, every cost-cutting measure, every deviation from standard practice. I did this to protect myself and to ensure that future maintenance issues could be properly addressed. Karen found her voice. "That's ancient history. We're here to discuss your current violation." "Actually, Karen, it's very current history, because those cost-cutting measures are beginning to fail." I clicked to my final slide, showing recent photos of the clubhouse exterior. The gutters are pulling away from the fascia boards because the board insisted on cheaper hangers. The cedar shingles are cracking because they wanted a lower grade of material. The front steps are settling because they reduced the foundation specifications. The room was completely silent now. Even the board members were staring at the screen with obvious concern. I estimate that this building will need significant repairs within the next 2 years. The electrical system is undersized and will need upgrading. The plumbing was installed with cheaper fixtures that are already showing signs of wear. The HVAC system was reduced in capacity and will struggle to maintain comfortable temperatures as the building ages. I turned off the projector and faced the room. So when Karen Middleton tells me that my restoration work doesn't meet HOA standards, I have to wonder what standards she's referring to. Because the building she's speaking from was built with compromised standards that I was forced to implement against my professional judgment. Karen's face was red with anger and embarrassment. "You can't prove any of those claims about future repairs." "Actually, I can." I opened one of my boxes and pulled out a thick folder. I have 15 years of documentation, including all the board meeting minutes where these cost-cutting measures were discussed and approved. I have receipts showing the inferior materials that were purchased. I have photos documenting every stage of construction, including the corners that were cut. I placed the folder on the table in front of the board members. I also have a current inspection report that details the existing problems and project's future maintenance needs. This building is going to cost the HOA a significant amount of money in the coming years. The room buzzed with conversation as residents processed this information. Several people were asking questions about the condition of the clubhouse and what it might mean for their HOA fees. Karen tried to regain B. control of the meeting. This is all speculation and deflection. We're here to address Dana's violation, not to relitigate past construction decisions. There is no violation, Karen. I pulled out another folder and handed copies of documents to each board member. This is a legal opinion from my attorney, along with documentation proving that my cabin predates the HOA and that my restoration work is protected under grandfathering provisions. Any attempt to force me to remove my improvements or seek retroactive approval would be a violation of my property rights. I handed out more documents. These are letters from neighbors supporting my restoration work. They recognize that my cabin enhances the neighborhood and increases property values. They appreciate the quality of workmanship and the respect I've shown for historic preservation. The board members were flipping through the documents, their expressions growing more uncomfortable by the minute. It was clear that they hadn't expected this level of preparation and documentation. Finally, I continued. I want to address the broader issue of HOA oversight and architectural standards. Since moving to this neighborhood, I've observed several violations that seem to be overlooked by the board. Houses with unauthorized additions, landscaping that violates setback requirements, and storage structures that clearly violate size limitations. I pulled out a photo album and placed it on the table. I've documented these violations over the past several months. It seems that enforcement is selective and arbitrary. Some homeowners are left alone, while others are harassed for minor issues. Karen's authority was crumbling before everyone's eyes. You can't just show up here and attack the integrity of the board. I'm not attacking anyone, Karen. I'm simply pointing out that if you want to enforce standards, those standards should be applied fairly and consistently. And they should be based on actual regulations, not personal preferences. One of the other board members, a man named Robert Chen, spoke up. Dana, these are serious allegations about the clubhouse condition. Do you really think we're facing significant repair costs? Robert, I'm not speculating. I'm giving you a professional assessment based on my knowledge of how this building was constructed. The problems I've identified are not possibilities, they're certainties. The only question is timing. What kind of costs are we talking about? I pulled out my inspection report and calculator. Conservative estimates suggest you're looking at $50,000 to $75,000 in repairs over the next 3 years. That's assuming you address the problems proactively. If you wait until systems fail, the costs could double. Gasps and concerned murmurs filled the room. For a community that prided itself on maintaining property values, the prospect of major HOA assessments was alarming. Karen made one last attempt to regain control. Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that Dana violated our architectural guidelines. Karen, I've presented legal documentation proving that no violation occurred. I've shown that the structure predates the HOA and that my restoration work is protected. I've demonstrated that the quality of my work exceeds anything in this neighborhood, including the building we're sitting in. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish? The room fell silent again. It was clear that Karen had no response to my evidence, no way to support her accusations, and no authority to enforce her demands. Robert Chen spoke again. I think we need to table this discussion and review the documentation Dana has provided. It's clear that there are complex legal and technical issues that require careful consideration. Another board member, Sarah Williams, nodded in agreement. I also think we should have the clubhouse inspected by an independent contractor to assess the concerns that have been raised. Karen looked defeated. Fine. We'll postpone any action regarding Dana's property pending further review. But this doesn't mean the board is abandoning its responsibility to enforce community standards. Of course not, I replied. But it does mean that enforcement should be based on actual violations, not personal opinions or arbitrary interpretations of the rules. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with discussion about the clubhouse inspection and procedures for addressing the various issues I had raised. By the time we adjourned, the entire dynamic had shifted. Karen's authority had been undermined, the board was questioning past decisions, and neighbors were viewing me as someone who had stood up to arbitrary enforcement. As people filed out of the meeting, several approached me with questions and comments. Some wanted to know more about the cabin restoration, others were concerned about the clubhouse problems, and a few were asking about my carpentry services. "Dana, that was incredible," said Margaret Torres, a neighbor who lived 2 streets over. "I had no idea you built this place. No wonder your cabin looks so beautiful." "Thank you, Margaret. I'm just glad people can see the quality of the work." "Would you be interested in looking at a project for us? We've been thinking about adding a deck to our backyard, but the HOA's approved contractors are ridiculously expensive." This was exactly what I had hoped might happen. "I'd be happy to take a look. Give me a call next week and we can discuss it." Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. By the time I finished packing up my equipment, I had collected business cards from 6 different neighbors who were interested in various projects. The word was spreading that there was a skilled craftsman in the neighborhood who could deliver quality work at reasonable prices. Over the following weeks, the effects of that meeting continued to ripple through the community. The board hired an independent inspector who confirmed my assessment of the clubhouse condition. The repair estimates were actually higher than my projections, closer to $80,000 for comprehensive fixes. Karen's influence on the board diminished significantly. Her arbitrary enforcement style had been exposed, and other board members began questioning her decisions. Several homeowners who had been harassed about minor violations found their cases dismissed after review. The clubhouse repairs became a major issue for the HOA. The board had to decide whether to proceed with expensive fixes or continue with minimal maintenance and hope for the best. They ultimately chose a middle ground, addressing the most critical issues while postponing some of the more expensive improvements. Meanwhile, my carpentry business in the neighborhood flourished. The deck project for Margaret Torres led to a kitchen renovation for her next-door neighbor. That project led to a custom furniture commission for someone else. Word spread about my skills, fair pricing, and professional approach. Within 6 months, I had completed projects for over a dozen neighbors. Each job showcased my abilities and reinforced my reputation for quality work. I was building pergolas, installing built-in storage systems, creating custom cabinetry, and designing outdoor living spaces that transformed ordinary backyards into beautiful extensions of the home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen's attempt to force me out of the neighborhood had instead established me as the go-to contractor for residents who wanted quality work at reasonable prices. Her attack on my cabin had provided the perfect platform to demonstrate my credentials and expertise. The HOA's approved contractor list began to seem less attractive to residents who had seen what I could accomplish. The official vendors were expensive, slow, and often delivered mediocre results. My work was faster, better, and more affordable. Market forces were at work, and quality was winning. Karen made one final attempt to cause trouble for me. She filed a complaint with the county building department, claiming that I was operating a business without proper permits. The investigation that followed was thorough, but concluded that I was in full compliance with all local regulations. My business license was current, my insurance was adequate, and all my work met or exceeded building codes. The building inspector who reviewed my projects was actually impressed with the quality of workmanship. He commented that it was refreshing to see someone who understood traditional construction methods and took pride in their craft. He even asked for my business card, mentioning that he might have some personal projects he wanted to discuss. By the end of my first year in the neighborhood, I had established myself as much more than just the person who had stood up to Karen Middleton. I was a valued member of the community, someone who contributed to the neighborhood's character and helped other residents improve their properties. The cabin that had started this entire conflict had become a source of pride for the entire neighborhood. People would walk by just to admire the craftsmanship and attention to detail. Several real estate agents mentioned it as a selling point when showing houses in the area. Property values in the immediate vicinity had actually increased, partly due to the positive impact of the restoration. I continued to maintain and improve the cabin, adding small touches that enhanced its beauty and functionality. I installed period-appropriate lighting fixtures, built custom furniture that complemented the architecture, and created a garden that reflected the natural setting. Every improvement was done with the same attention to detail and respect for traditional methods that had characterized the original restoration. The workshop space in the cabin allowed me to take on more complex projects. I had room for larger tools and equipment, better lighting for detailed work, and climate control that protected both my tools and my materials. The facility rivaled commercial workshops in terms of capability and exceeded most in terms of organization and efficiency. As my reputation grew, I began receiving inquiries from outside the neighborhood. People heard about my work through word of mouth and wanted to hire me for historic restorations, custom homes, and specialty projects. I had to become more selective about the work I accepted, choosing projects that challenged my skills and allowed me to create something truly special. The contrast between my thriving business and the HOA's ongoing problems became more pronounced over time. While I was building beautiful, functional spaces that enhanced people's lives, the board was struggling with budget problems, maintenance issues, and declining participation from residents who had lost faith in the organization's effectiveness. Karen Middleton's term as president ended the following year, and she chose not to run for re-election. Her successor, Robert Chan, approached me about serving on the Architectural Review Committee. He felt that my expertise would be valuable in helping the board make better decisions about construction and renovation projects. I agreed to serve, seeing it as an opportunity to help establish reasonable standards and fair enforcement procedures. My experience with arbitrary decision-making had taught me the importance of clear guidelines and consistent application of rules. The Architectural Review Committee began functioning more effectively with input from someone who understood construction and design. We developed clearer guidelines for common projects, established reasonable timelines for approval, and created a process for handling disputes. The arbitrary enforcement that had characterized Karen's leadership was replaced with a more professional approach. One of my first recommendations was to revise the approved contractor list. Instead of limiting residents to a few expensive vendors, we opened the process to any licensed, insured contractor who met basic qualifications. This increased competition and gave residents more choices while maintaining quality standards. The change was popular with homeowners who had been frustrated by the limited options and high prices of the approved vendors. It also encouraged more residents to improve their properties, knowing they could choose contractors based on quality and value rather than political connections. The HOA's financial situation improved as well. By addressing the clubhouse problems proactively and negotiating better deals with service providers, we were able to reduce operating costs and avoid the major assessments that had been projected. The money saved was redirected toward other community improvements that residents actually wanted. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that Karen Middleton's attack on my cabin was actually one of the best things that could have happened to me. Her attempt to force me out of the neighborhood had instead established me as a respected member of the community and launched a successful expansion of my business. The cabin itself had become much more than just a restored building. It was a symbol of what could be accomplished when someone was willing to stand up for what was right, when quality craftsmanship was valued over political convenience, and when a community came together to support fairness and common sense. I still live in the cabin, still work from the workshop, and still take pride in the restoration that started this entire journey. Every morning when I look out the windows at the peaceful setting, I'm reminded of the importance of preserving beautiful things and standing up to those who would destroy them for petty reasons. The neighborhood has changed for the better since that dramatic HOA meeting. Property values have increased, residents are more engaged in community decisions, and there's a greater appreciation for quality workmanship and historic preservation. The arbitrary enforcement and petty power struggles of the past have been replaced by a more collaborative approach to community governance. Karen Middleton moved away from the neighborhood about 18 months after her confrontation with me. I heard she was having similar conflicts with neighbors in her new community, suggesting that the problem was with her approach rather than the specific situation here. Some people never learn that cooperation works better than confrontation. I continue to work on interesting projects, both in the neighborhood and beyond. The reputation I established during that conflict has opened doors to opportunities I never would have imagined. I've been invited to speak at conferences about historic preservation, consulted on restoration projects for museums and historic societies, and worked with architects on custom homes that challenge conventional construction methods. The cabin remains the centerpiece of my property, a testament to what can be accomplished when traditional craftsmanship meets modern understanding. It's also a reminder that sometimes the best response to unreasonable demands is simply to demonstrate superior knowledge and preparation. The workshop continues to be the heart of my business, where I create custom pieces that will be treasured for generations. The tools and techniques I use connect me to a long tradition of craftsmen who understood that building something beautiful requires patience, skill, and respect for materials. And every time I drive past the clubhouse, I'm reminded of the importance of doing things right the first time. The building continues to require maintenance and repairs, evidence of the compromises that were made during its construction. It serves as a constant reminder that quality is always worth the investment. The entire experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for what's right, the importance of documentation and preparation, and the power of expertise in the face of arbitrary authority. It also reinforced my belief that good craftsmanship speaks for itself and that people recognize quality when they see it. Today, 5 years after that first confrontation with Karen Middleton, I can honestly say that her attempt to force me to tear down my cabin was the catalyst for some of the most positive changes in my life. Career. Sometimes the best victories come not from avoiding conflict, but from being prepared to meet it with knowledge, skill, and determination. The cabin still stands, more beautiful than ever, a testament to the power of preservation and the importance of standing up to those who would destroy something valuable for their own petty reasons. And I'm still here, still building, still creating things that will last long after the people who would tear them down have been forgotten. The months following my victory over Karen's HOA power trip brought unexpected developments that transformed not just my business, but the entire character of Willowbrook Estates. What started as a simple property dispute had evolved into something much larger, a community-wide awakening about quality, fairness, and the value of skilled craftsmanship. My phone rang constantly with requests for estimates, consultations, and advice. The deck project for Margaret Torres had turned into a complete backyard transformation that included a pergola, built-in seating, and a custom outdoor kitchen. When her neighbors saw the results, they wanted similar improvements for their own properties. The outdoor kitchen project pushed my skills in new directions. I had to coordinate with electricians and plumbers, design custom storage solutions, and create weatherproof cabinetry that could withstand the elements while maintaining the aesthetic appeal of fine furniture. The result was a functional outdoor space that rivaled indoor kitchens in terms of capability and exceeded them in terms of beauty. Word of the outdoor kitchen spread beyond the neighborhood. A local lifestyle magazine heard about the project and wanted to feature it in their home and garden section. The photographer spent an entire day capturing every detail, from the hand-forged hardware to the custom tile work that I had installed myself. The magazine article appeared 3 months later with a 6-page spread showcasing the outdoor kitchen and highlighting my restoration of the cabin. The writer described my work as a masterclass in traditional craftsmanship applied to modern living. The article generated dozens of inquiries from across the region, people who wanted similar projects for their own properties. Among the callers was Elena Vasquez, a historic preservation specialist who worked with the State Heritage Commission. She had seen the magazine article and was interested in discussing a project that might interest me. We met at a coffee shop near the state capitol, and she explained that they had identified several historic structures that needed restoration but lacked the budget for large commercial contractors. "We need someone who understands traditional building methods and can work within our budget constraints," she explained. "These projects require skilled craftsmanship, not just generic construction work. Your reputation suggests you might be exactly what we're looking for." The first project she offered was a 19th-century blacksmith shop that had been donated to the Heritage Commission. The building was structurally sound, but needed complete restoration of the interior workspace, including the forge, bellows system, and specialized tool storage. The goal was to create a working demonstration facility where visitors could see traditional metalworking techniques. I accepted the project immediately. Working on historic preservation at the state level would provide credibility and exposure that money couldn't buy. It would also allow me to learn techniques and methods that weren't commonly used in modern construction. The blacksmith shop restoration took 4 months and challenged every aspect of my skills. I had to research 19th-century construction methods, source materials that matched the original specifications, and work with specialists in historical metalworking to ensure the forge and related equipment would function properly. The project required me to learn traditional joinery techniques that had been largely forgotten in modern construction. I spent weeks practicing mortise and tenon joints, dovetail connections, and other methods that relied on precision craftsmanship rather than modern fasteners. The work was demanding but incredibly satisfying. The restored blacksmith shop opened to the public 6 months later with a demonstration by a master blacksmith who had traveled from Virginia to test the equipment. The forge worked perfectly. The bellows system provided consistent airflow, and the workspace allowed visitors to see every aspect of traditional metalworking. Elena was thrilled with the results. "This is exactly what we envisioned. The attention to detail and respect for historical accuracy is remarkable. We have several other projects that would benefit from your expertise." The success of the blacksmith shop restoration led to additional State Heritage Commission projects. I worked on a gristmill, a covered bridge, and a collection of farm buildings that demonstrated different aspects of rural life in the 1800s. Each project taught me new techniques and expanded my understanding of traditional building methods. The state work also provided a steady income stream that allowed me to be more selective about private projects. I could focus on interesting, challenging work rather than taking every job that came along. This selectivity actually increased demand for my services, as people began to see my work as exclusive and high quality. Back in Willowbrook Estates, the changes continued to ripple through the community. The Architectural Review Committee had become more reasonable and efficient under my guidance. We streamlined the approval process for common projects, created standardized guidelines for typical improvements, and established clear criteria for evaluating unusual requests. The improved approval process encouraged more residents to undertake home improvement projects. Property values continued to rise as people invested in their homes, knowing they could get timely approvals and choose their own contractors. The neighborhood began to develop a reputation for well-maintained properties and reasonable HOA governance. Robert Chen, who had replaced Karen as HOA president, approached me about another issue that had been troubling the board. Several residents had complained about the quality of work being done by some of the contractors on the approved vendor list. Projects were taking longer than expected, workmanship was inconsistent, and prices seemed inflated compared to independent contractors. "We need to revise our contractor approval process," Robert explained. "The current system was designed to limit liability, but it's also limiting competition and quality. We need your expertise to develop better standards." I agreed to chair a committee to review and revise the contractor approval process. We developed new criteria based on licensing, insurance, references, and demonstrated quality, rather than political connections or exclusive agreements. The new system was more transparent and gave residents better choices while maintaining appropriate standards. The contractor approval reforms were popular with residents but caused problems with some of the existing approved vendors. Two companies that had enjoyed exclusive relationships with the HOA complained that the new competition was unfair and threatened to stop serving the community entirely. "Let them go," I advised the board. "If they can't compete on quality and price, they don't deserve to keep their customers. The market will sort this out." The board accepted my recommendation, and the threatened companies did indeed stop working in the neighborhood. But their departure created opportunities for better contractors who were eager to serve residents who valued quality workmanship. The overall standard of construction and renovation work in the community improved significantly. One of the new contractors who joined the approved list was James Morrison, a young carpenter who had recently completed his apprenticeship. He approached me about working together on larger projects that required multiple skilled craftsmen. I was impressed by his enthusiasm and attention to detail, and we began collaborating on complex renovations that neither of us could handle alone. Our first joint project was a complete kitchen renovation for the Williams family. Sarah Williams, one of the HOA board members, wanted to update her 1980s kitchen with modern functionality while maintaining the character of her traditional home. The project required custom cabinetry, intricate tile work, and careful integration of modern appliances with classic design elements. James handled the general construction and installation work, while I focused on the custom cabinetry and detailed finish work. The collaboration worked perfectly, with each of us contributing our strengths while learning from the other's expertise. The finished kitchen was featured in another magazine article, this time focusing on the benefits of skilled craftsmanship in home renovation. The success of our collaboration led to additional joint projects. We developed a reputation for taking on challenging renovations that other contractors avoided. Historic homes, unusual architectural features, and custom design requirements became our specialty. We could tackle projects that required both traditional skills and modern building knowledge. The partnership also allowed us to take on larger projects outside the neighborhood. A wealthy collector hired us to restore a Victorian mansion that had been neglected for decades. The project required 18 months of intensive work, including structural repairs, restoration of original millwork, and recreation of decorative elements that had been damaged or removed over the years. The Victorian mansion restoration became a showcase for our combined skills. Every room presented unique challenges that required creative solutions and meticulous attention to detail. We restored original hardwood floors, rebuilt intricate plaster moldings, and recreated stained glass windows based on historical photographs. The project attracted attention from preservation societies and architectural historians. We were invited to present our work at conferences and workshops, sharing techniques and approaches with other craftsmen working in historic preservation. The recognition established us as specialists in high-end restoration work. Back in Willowbrook Estates, the transformation of the community continued to evolve. The cabin that had sparked the original conflict with Karen Middleton had become a symbol of what was possible when quality craftsmanship was valued and supported. People would bring visitors to see the restoration, using it as an example of how historic structures could be preserved and enhanced. The workshop in the cabin had become a destination for other craftsmen who wanted to see traditional techniques in action. I began offering weekend workshops where experienced woodworkers could learn specialized skills like hand-cut joinery, traditional finishing techniques, and tool restoration. The workshops were always fully booked, with waiting lists stretching months ahead. One particularly memorable workshop participant was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a professor of architectural history who was researching traditional building methods for a book she was writing. She spent a week in the workshop, learning hands-on techniques while documenting the processes for academic study. "What you're doing here is preserving knowledge that's being lost," she explained. These traditional methods represent centuries of accumulated wisdom about working with wood and other natural materials. Academic study can document the techniques, but actually practicing them provides insights that can't be gained through research alone. Dr. Walsh's book, when it was published 2 years later, featured extensive references to the techniques she had learned in my workshop. The academic recognition added another dimension to my reputation, establishing me as someone who bridged the gap between traditional craftsmanship and scholarly understanding. The growing recognition of my work attracted attention from unexpected quarters. A television producer contacted me about participating in a documentary series about traditional crafts in America. The show would feature craftsmen who were preserving techniques and skills that were disappearing from modern construction. The filming took place over several days, with cameras documenting both the workshop activities and the restored cabin. The producer was particularly interested in the story of how the HOA conflict had led to greater recognition of my skills and the importance of quality craftsmanship in the community. When the documentary aired 6 months later, it generated hundreds of inquiries from across the country. People wanted to visit the workshop, hire me for projects, or learn about the traditional techniques I used. The exposure was overwhelming, but also exciting, as it connected me with others who shared my passion for preserving traditional skills. The documentary also brought attention to Willowbrook Estates as a community that valued craftsmanship and historic preservation. Real estate agents began marketing the neighborhood as a place where skilled artisans lived and worked, where quality was valued over quantity, and where residents took pride in maintaining and improving their properties. Property values in the neighborhood had increased by 30% over the 3 years since my confrontation with Karen Middleton. The combination of skilled craftsmanship, reasonable HOA governance, and community pride had created a desirable place to live that commanded premium prices. The success of the neighborhood transformation attracted attention from urban planners and community development specialists. I was invited to speak at conferences about how skilled craftsmanship could enhance property values and create stronger communities. The presentations led to consulting opportunities with other communities that wanted to encourage similar improvements. One consulting project involved a historic district that was struggling with declining property values and deteriorating buildings. The local government wanted to encourage renovation and restoration but lacked the expertise to evaluate proposals and guide property owners toward quality improvements. I worked with the planning department to develop guidelines for historic renovations, created an approved contractor program based on the successful model from Willowbrook Estates, and provided training for building inspectors who needed to evaluate traditional construction methods. The program was implemented over 2 years and resulted in significant improvements in the district's appearance and property values. The consulting work provided another income stream and allowed me to apply the lessons learned from my own community to help others. Each project was different, but the core principles remained the same. Value quality craftsmanship, establish fair and reasonable standards, and create systems that encourage improvement rather than discouraging it. James Morrison and I continued to collaborate on increasingly complex projects. Our reputation for handling challenging renovations had spread throughout the region, and we were receiving inquiries from clients who had exhausted other options. Historic buildings that other contractors couldn't or wouldn't tackle became our specialty. One particularly challenging project was a 19th-century church that had been damaged by a tornado. The insurance company wanted to demolish the building and construct a modern replacement, but the congregation was determined to restore their historic sanctuary. They hired us to assess the damage and develop a restoration plan that would preserve the building's character while meeting modern safety standards. The church restoration took 2 years and required us to learn specialized techniques for working with stone, stained glass, and traditional timber framing. We collaborated with specialists in each field while handling the overall project management and much of the detailed woodwork ourselves. The restored church was featured in multiple publications and won several awards for historic preservation. The project established our reputation for taking on impossible challenges and delivering exceptional results. The success led to additional church restorations and other institutional projects that required specialized skills. The growth of our business created new challenges and opportunities. We needed additional skilled craftsmen to handle the volume of work, but finding people with the right combination of skills and attitude was difficult. Modern construction training emphasized speed and efficiency over quality and attention to detail. I began working with local trade schools and community colleges to develop training programs that emphasized traditional skills alongside modern techniques. The programs attracted students who were interested in craftsmanship as a career rather than just a job. These students became the foundation for expanding our workforce. The training programs also created connections with educators and administrators who were interested in preserving traditional skills. I was invited to serve on advisory boards and curriculum committees, helping to shape programs that would train the next generation of skilled craftsmen. The educational involvement led to opportunities to establish scholarship programs for students who showed exceptional promise in traditional crafts. The scholarships provided financial support for students who might not otherwise be able to afford the training, while also creating a pipeline of skilled workers for the growing demand for quality craftsmanship. Meanwhile, the cabin that had started this entire journey continued to serve as both home and workshop. I had made additional improvements over the years, always maintaining the character of the original structure while enhancing its functionality. The building had become a perfect example of how historic preservation could create beautiful, functional spaces that served modern needs. The garden surrounding the cabin had matured into a showcase of native plants and traditional landscaping techniques. I had researched the types of plants that would have been used in the 1940s and created a landscape that complemented the building's historic character while providing modern amenities like outdoor lighting and irrigation systems. The combination of the restored cabin, mature gardens, and thriving workshop had created a destination that attracted visitors from across the region. Architecture students, preservation specialists, and skilled craftsmen made pilgrimages to see the work and learn about traditional techniques. The success of the cabin restoration and the business it had generated created opportunities I never could have imagined when I first purchased the property. What began as a simple desire to restore a beautiful old building had evolved into a career that combined my passion for craftsmanship with opportunities to preserve important skills and knowledge. The neighborhood had been transformed as well. Where once there had been arbitrary enforcement and petty power struggles, there was now a community that valued quality, fairness, and continuous improvement. The changes had created a positive feedback loop, where good governance encouraged property improvements, which increased property values, which attracted residents who cared about maintaining high standards. The success of Willowbrook Estates had become a model for other communities that wanted to encourage property improvements while maintaining reasonable governance. The principles we had established, valuing quality craftsmanship, creating fair and transparent processes, and encouraging collaboration rather than confrontation, had proven successful over time. As I looked back on the journey that began with Karen Middleton's misguided attempt to force me to tear down my cabin, I realized that her attack had actually been the catalyst for positive changes that extended far beyond my personal situation. The confrontation had forced me to document and present my qualifications, which led to recognition and opportunities that might never have developed otherwise. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about the importance of standing up for what's right, the power of expertise and preparation, and the potential for positive change when people work together toward common goals. It had also reinforced my belief that quality craftsmanship and traditional skills have enduring value in a world that often prioritizes speed and cost over excellence and durability. The cabin still stands today, more beautiful than ever, a testament to the power of skilled restoration and the importance of preserving our architectural heritage. It serves as both home and workshop, a place where traditional techniques are practiced and preserved, and where the next generation of craftsmen can learn the skills that connect us to our past while serving our future needs. The workshop continues to be a center of learning and innovation, where traditional methods are combined with modern understanding to create solutions that honor the past while serving contemporary needs. The combination of historical knowledge and practical experience continues to attract students, colleagues, and clients who value the unique perspective that comes from mastering traditional skills. And every day, as I work in the shop or walk through the gardens, I'm reminded of how much can change when someone is willing to stand up for quality, fairness, and the preservation of valuable skills and knowledge. The journey that began with a simple cabin restoration had become something much larger, a demonstration of how individual actions can create positive change that extends throughout a community and beyond.